units of the nation's services head the parade up Broadway as New York City gives a traditional hero's welcome to Vietnamese President Diem. It's a warm and cordial greeting for President Diem, democratic leader of 11 million South Vietnam people. At City Hall, the visiting 56-year-old statesman who brought a stable government to the Far East nation and stemmed communist expansion is officially greeted by New York City's Mayor Wagner. A salute to a staunch U.S. friend in troubled Asia.
Something happening here.
Okay, so what you just witnessed was a parade that was given in honor of the new South Vietnamese leader. His name is Diem, and the U.S. was all about Diem, right? Last week we covered Ho Chi Minh, the Vietnamese, and what was going on in North Vietnam. So this week we need to really shift focus and look at what was happening in the South, because that's where America was throwing all of its weight before the war started, right? Okay, so let's kind of break down a little bit about Diem, all right? So Diem came to power right after the Geneva Accords that we talked about last week. You know, that agreement that was signed that split Vietnam into the North and the South, right? The North being communist and the South being able to rule itself under democratic rule, right? So it's kind of complicated, but Diem comes to power as the president, and he is originally seen as being a very promising leader, especially from the perspective of Americans, right? The Americans wanted to support Diem in whatever way they could. They wanted to help him politically, they wanted to help the country financially, they also wanted to help him militarily, because they wanted him to be the guy that defeated the communist North. Now here's the deal. The reason why America liked Diem so much was he was anti-communist and he was anti-colonialist, which kind of worked for America because then it meant new, fresh, clean slate. He was saying, forget the French, right? But also, man, these guys up north, they don't know what they're talking about. And the Americans loved that, right? His nationalism was a big deal for them. Now where it starts to get a little bit tricky was Diem was Catholic, right? And if you remember from last week, we talked about how the French brought Catholicism to Vietnam as a way to control them, as a way to colonize them. So that already was a problem for Diem. People saw him as an outsider, as an elitist, as someone who had already kind of culturally sided with the French, even though he was saying that he was against them, right? And so this caused some problems for him. It also didn't help that he helped to promote people within his family to high positions within the Catholic Church in the country. And then what really started to become a problem was the fact that he was starting to implement policies that were very restrictive for Buddhist monks. Now, Buddhism was the primary religion in Vietnam prior to the war, still is till this day. Right? And one of the things that Diem was known for was brutally restricting their access to power and resources, right? It got so bad that it actually broke out into clashes at certain points and even major protests, right? Some of you may be familiar with the image of the monk setting himself on fire. This was actually a protest against Diem and his policies. The monks had it so bad that some were willing to say, I'm willing to sacrifice my own life to show the rest of the world how bad things are here under Diem. Now this made him incredibly unpopular amongst a majority of people, right? And so what ended up happening is a lot of people in South Vietnam started to sympathize and side with the North, right? So in the North you had the Viet Minh, which were the communist foot soldiers, but in the South you had this kind of group called the Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong were sympathizers to the North. They were kind of like sleeper cells, right? They would aid in helping the North launch attacks in South Vietnam against the South Vietnamese army, right? So they were seen as like super traitorous in the South, but in the North they were seen as freedom fighters, okay? And they were fighting against Diem because they saw him as just a new puppet, a new tool of a new colonialist ruler. They had France as the colonial ruler, but now it was America that was coming in. This is also where Diem screws up, because Diem and America come up with this idea to deal with the Viet Cong. It's called the Strategic Hamlet Plan. And what they did was they decided to modernize the rural countryside, right? Get people out of their farms, get people out of the rice paddies, and let's build new villages where everyone can come together, right? And call them hamlets, right? These hamlets would be protection zones, right? So let's dig a moat around them, they thought. And then let's put up like big spiky poles, and then let's put up barbed wire fences, and then let's put up guard towers. Starting to sound less like a village and more like a prison, right? And that's what a lot of people saw it as. They were being forced to move to these villages under duress, right? Most of the first accounts of people moving was at gunpoint, right? People were forced to remove themselves from their traditional homes where they may have been living for generations, and now they're being forced to move into these basic kind of like prison camps as they saw it, right? And that was seen as Diem siding with America at their own expense, which just furthered more and more people to side with the North. Now, this started to raise a lot of alarm bells for people in South Vietnam, right? Especially the military. Now, the military in South Vietnam and the American government had been working like hand in hand, thick as thieves, tight buds, right? Ride or die. The CIA had been sending operatives to kind of help the South Vietnamese military figure out who was Viet Cong and who wasn't. And what ended up happening is the South Vietnamese military started to think, this Diem guy maybe isn't so good for us, right? He seems to be into his own power more, right? Getting his family into positions of power, stealing money for himself, siding with America a little too much. Maybe we want to get rid of him. And they decided to have what's called a coup. Right? And a coup is just a fancy term for when the military decides to take over power from a leader that was democratically elected that they don't think is fit for the job, right? That they think is harming it, right? Now here's the deal. Even though the US had been like super all about Diem at first, they turned their backs on Diem too. They realized, hey, this Diem guy isn't all that we thought he was cracked up to be. So let's back the military coup, because maybe they'll put in a strong general and we can back that guy. And that'll be, that's the plan, right? And so the US was trying to navigate this coup plan, right? Ultimately, they didn't want Diem to lose his life, right? There was a bit of a plan to get him out of the country. But what ended up happening is Diem had been working with a CIA agent named Lodge, right? And what was going down is the presidential palace had been surrounded by the military, right? He was afraid for his life. So Diem is calling Lodge saying, can you get me out of the country? And Lodge said, we got you, we're gonna get a plane. The US government decided, if we get him a plane, then it shows that we knew about the coup. And if we knew about the coup, then we were involved. So Diem, sorry, you're kind of out of luck. And what ended up happening is Diem fled the palace, tried to hide, and was captured by the military and assassinated, right? He ended up dying. And his brother too, who was a top military government official, right? And this is a kind of a black eye for American policy, right? It's said that when the president at the time, John F. Kennedy, found out about the assassination, that he left the meeting he was in visibly ill, right? And I think that just goes to show that this was a lesson for America, that your decisions have consequences. They were all pro super mega Diem, but then when you turn your back and abandon him, it cost people their lives, right? And I am not trying to say that Diem was the best leader or was the worst leader, but did he deserve to be assassinated? I don't know that anybody deserves to be assassinated, right? The military afterwards pretended like it was a suicide, right? Photos ended up getting leaked out and it was very clear that he was bound and shot, right? But what the military did afterwards is they set up a two-tier type of government with the military on top and then an elected popular official below them, right? The US, while they weren't like super huge fans of this, thought it was an opportunity for them, because if the military was in control and the US wanted to take military action against the North, that was actually going to be a pretty good partnership for them. Okay, so check out the assignment that's linked down below, and get on it.